PacificBeerChat.com. All right, welcome to Pacific Beer Chat. Today we're going to talk about something a little different. We're going to talk about women in craft beer. It's supposed to be Chelsea of Brutiful BC hosting tonight, but she's sick, so I'll take that role. We've got Mike and Britt from the Beer Raider, Terry,
Hi.
West Coast Beer Geek. We got me, Mike's Craft Beer. Got Joanna from Old Yale Brewing.
Hey.
Amber from Raincoast Brews. And Lundy, R&B Brewing, Pink
Howdy.
Pints, BC Craft Beer Month. We were just going to talk on the points that Chelsea had laid out, and I'll start with just asking the ladies to talk about their role in the beer world. If we can start with, I guess, Joanna, since she's first on my list here.
Hey, so I run the tasting room at Old Yale Brewing. I am a CBS in the Cicerone program, working towards my level 2. I've pretty much done a little bit of everything around there, from helping the guys brew to shipping, receiving, and working my way up to the tasting room.
Sounds good. How about you, Lundy, since you're next on my list there?
Okay. I've probably been around longer than all of you combined.
Possibly.
Started 2003 being CAMRA Vancouver president, and then ended up becoming CAMRA BC president. Started Pink Pints probably in about 2011. Got my Cicerone just around that same point, so level 2. I'm not too sure if I want to even do level 3. So and now I'm with R&B Brewing, so I do everything from, I'm officially office manager, but I kind of do everything that nobody else wants to do and then some. But my most, I guess, role I'm proudest of is working with Pink Pints, with the Pink Boot Society, doing a lot of education programs for women and just supporting the cause.
Yeah, and you hold events and stuff, don't you, sometimes?
Yep, 4 times a year at least. So we usually have International Women's Day dinner, BC Craft Beer Month dinner. I'm planning a tour for the summer. We're going to go to a couple of the breweries, try to do some education programs. Yep.
That's exciting. And then Amber.
I'm Amber. I am a craft beer consultant, and I started a company called Raincoast Brews. I worked in liquor stores and as a bartender for almost 20 years. And then actually one day I met Mike, and I was working in a brewery and just trying to learn everything I could. And he just kind of gave me this idea where I realized that there was lots of guys talking about beer in BC, but not really very many women. So I did my research and saw people like Lundy and Claire Wilson and Julie, and I just wanted to be a part of it. So even though I figured out that maybe the brewing part isn't really my thing, the rest of it, everything else about beer, just I'm super passionate about it, and I know that this is what I'm going to do for the next while anyway.
I guess Chelsea wanted to ask sort of what got you all into craft beer first, and the industry in general. But
well, I think I'll start. I think part of the reason I kind of started, well, I fell in love with beer probably 17, 18 years ago, and realized I fell in love even more with craft beer. I started my marketing course and started to meet people, and just realized the craft beer industry has got the coolest people ever. I think everyone will agree that we've got the most incredible people working in the industry. But my biggest thing, just like Amber noted, is there weren't any women around, which is why I decided to start getting out there and start trying to find what women were there and find out what they were doing and see what we could do to make them more out there. That's kind of just where I started. And of course, the drinking's great.
Yes.
What about you, Amber?
Well, actually, because I thought I hated beer. I just kind of grew up being one of those people who would dump the beer out and fill it full of water and drink it at the party and pretend that I was cool, but I didn't like it. I thought it tasted like shit, like Budweiser and Lucky.
I think most of us agreed with that.
So once I found some beers that it just kind of woke my taste buds. Like I couldn't even believe that this was still beer, but it was so good. And then once the ball got rolling, I just couldn't stop. I had to know everything I could about beer and where they came from and who's brewing them. And And yeah, for a while there, actually, it was almost too much. I was just doing nothing but study and homebrew with my friend Megan, who is a brewer at Wolf Brewing here in Nanaimo. And yeah, I'm just having fun, and the people are amazing. I couldn't think of better, something that I would want to be more a part of than the craft beer scene.
Now, Amber, I'm just going to ask you, both of us worked in liquor stores. Did you find that you kind of worked more with helping women drink better quality beer, or trying to, I mean, I found when I worked at a liquor store, I was constantly having women saying, I hate beer, I only drink wine. But they were curious about beer, their boyfriends were, right? So they wanted to drink beer. So what can I give you to drink? And I try to do that a lot.
Yeah, I actually would get people like my little pet projects, and I would have them start with one beer, and then whether or not they loved or hated that one, I would go from there. And as I learned that, like, save the IPAs for later, then it really is fun. I don't know how many women I've turned on to beer that literally thought they didn't like beer a year ago, that's what they go to the store and buy.
That's kind of cool.
There's so much. It's a learning thing too. I don't know about you guys, but for me, I mean, I'm a single mom and I don't have a lot of things that are mine. And I just got so passionate about it that I wanted to know more constantly. And I'm studying for my Cicerone level 2 right now as well.
Nice. How about you, Joanna?
What got me into craft beer? Well, honestly, like, I started getting into beer by just drinking whatever everybody else had. And usually it was PBR or Old Milwaukee or something like that. And I found myself being full and not satisfied. And so I got into like import beer, be it like Guinness and that sort of thing. And I was like, oh, it's like, I don't know, flavor. So I started getting more and more into that sort of thing. And then one day my friend brought over a case of Phillips ginger beer. And I thought that was the most amazing thing that I'd ever put in my mouth. And from there, it started expanding. And you were starting to see a lot more of these really cool labels and even better beer. And I was actually enjoying what I was drinking. And so it became a bit of an obsession for me to always try and find what was new, what was exciting, what looked great. I started homebrewing, realized that the creativity that, something you can create, it was genuinely an art. And that got me hooked. I watched Beer Wars, started watching documentaries, and it just solidified my passion into the industry. And so, yeah, once I got the job in the industry, I was elated, and I'm hooked ever since. I live and breathe craft beer and everything about it. Everything.
That's awesome. All right, I guess the next thing she wanted to kind of ask is, with such a male-dominated industry like craft beer, what does it mean to be a woman in the craft beer industry right now? You want to tackle that?
Well, I think this is such an amazing time to be a woman here. So why wouldn't we be a part of the craft beer scene? I
Totally
mean,
agree.
we're half the consumers, and if
We're
you look
more
at the
than-
numbers, the women beer is growing every day.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. I mean, actually, we're not just 50% of the consumers. We're also the ones behind the scenes, whether we're liquor stores or whatever, that are actually helping to sell the product.
Yeah.
Look at how
Absolutely.
sales reps out there that are females that are actually promoting the industry. We're looking at, more than 60, 70% that are out there promoting the industry. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I find that part pretty fascinating myself, because before I got into the industry, it was the outside looking in. I mean, sex sells. Women are always there. I mean, you've got companies like Pretty Kitty, where people can hire women to go and promote alcoholic beverages. And now you're starting to see women who actually care about this. And it's not just about selling the beer, it's about selling education and teaching people about the products and having a passion about it. And so I think, agreed, it's an amazing time to be a part of this industry, because we're changing people's outlooks. We are one of them. It's not just wine, it's not just cider. It's not just a Radler. You know, there's IPAs and there's barrel-aged stouts and all of that, and we can
You're the
almost relate that to other beverages that people drink on a regular basis and start to change their minds.
All right. I guess things have been changing. But how have you seen things change over the last few years in the industry? I think things really are changing right now. It seems, at least to me.
I think the thing is as the craft beer industry is getting bigger and bigger, we're seeing more changes. We're also seeing a lot of things going back as well. I think there's a few of us that are noticing in a lot of the especially in the Pink Boot Society website, a lot of conversations we're having, how we're noticing that the labels are once again becoming using women as a sexual image as opposed to not doing that. As you know, there's no need for that. There's a combination. So in some ways we're just getting bigger and better. In other ways we're going backwards.
That's a fair.
Yeah, you have a lot of lazy marketers out there.
A lot of them, you know, taking advantage and just not thinking. But what is kind of cool is that when you actually bring it to their attention, we're actually finding the more of them are just saying, you know what, I'm sorry, wasn't even thinking about it. It's just second nature.
Yeah.
And they actually usually a lot of times change things.
It's so easy to market toward these
I
boobs.
was going to comment on that because as a
There's no
marketer
need.
myself, it's just anytime you see like using sex as a sales tactic is lazy because sadly it has an effect. It is quote unquote effective, but not as effective as a properly thought out marketing campaign, like a more creative way of marketing. And so, I think it's a symptom of the industry growing so quickly. People are looking for ways to stand out and get that attention of the consumer, and there's just not enough creativity marketing-wise. And so everybody resorts to a pair of boobs, which is just stupid, in my opinion. We're better than that.
Well,
Yeah,
you've got companies like, you have Old Milwaukee who puts the pinup modeling on the cans, but then you also have Lagunitas who has their series of Little Something Something, and they sort of went in the same vein. And I don't know, what as a marketer, what do you think draws people's attention more towards, say, Lagunitas than like an Old Milwaukee? Am I getting a little deep? I don't know.
No, do it.
They're two different brands, obviously, and Old Milwaukee or whatever you want to call it. I'm sure Terry has a perfect descriptor for it. It's their image that they've had for so long, so they have to kind of keep with it. But I don't know. I just look at it as lazy across the board. Even I'll call out Red Racer on their kind of pinup girl on the bike. You got enough money that you can do something better than that. You can change.
Wow.
Hi, Shauna.
Hey, Shauna, welcome.
Hey, Donna.
Yeah, it's lazy. Case in point, it's just lazy and using a.
Yeah, and I think another thing that a lot of marketers forget too. I mean, a lot of the guys in the industry. I mean, I have a 9-year-old daughter now. I don't want that crap hanging around in my fridge. Like, it's just, how do I drink that in front of her and be like, oh hey, look what Dad has. That's just not cool, right?
Yeah.
And the conversation, I want her to not have to deal with that kind of shit. So, when I look at the industry, there's still some pretty. I mean, there's still some rape culture associated with some of the names out there. There's one called Panty Peeler that a brewery stopped and then restarted again, which was pretty disappointing by Midnight Sun there. There's a few other beers like that are just nasty. You just kind of look at it and you're like, I don't want that. Nobody should want that.
Yeah.
It's frustrating, frustrating as someone who's.
Well, and
Brown
what
Shoes does the same thing too. They kind of go off from having really amazing artwork in general to sort of sexualizing a different brand. And it's an interesting thing because they don't need to. They can put amazing artwork on their label and not have that, but then they'll have some sort of simplified sort of, you
and
know.
what I find really ridiculous about the thing too is once you put out a good beer and you have a name attached to it, it almost, for lack of a better term, doesn't matter. Because, you know, if it's a great beer and it makes waves in the industry, why do you need some sexified lady on the label when you could call it something else? And if it's a good beer, it's going to stand out there and it's going to get its attention.
It's frustrating. Like it's frustrating as a woman to be reduced to something as simple as I don't even know if derogatory is the right word, but a name or an image to sell something that I enjoy so much. I know there's a Vancouver-based brewery, and I love them, but they have one beer that always just makes me angry because I ask, like, why? What's the point in that? How does that make your product better to have that as the name and the image? You had anything in the whole wide world. And it's frustrating because it's a real sense of powerlessness because you can say all you want, you know, this is not cool, you can't do that, but are they going to change it? Probably not. And it's just really frustrating.
Understandable. All right, Terry, did you want to bring up the next topic there you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, it's just you know, I know the sort of known and thought of history that's, I mean, it's got to be the case, is that you know, it was most likely that it was a female that discovered beer in the first place, and throughout history, you know, females have been the brewers for centuries and centuries, thousands of years. It was most likely them that was brewing the beer, which is just baffling that we don't have more female brewers out there, given the history. But I wonder if any of you wanted to maybe touch on that a little bit more and educate us a little bit on that.
Well, they always say this, the women were the ones that actually made the food, made the bread. A lot of people are saying that because the yeast is airborne, that's how basically beer was created, with a combination of beer and airborne yeast, created beer, liquid beer to begin with. And people started getting drunk on liquid beer and went, holy crap, this is great. Let's turn it into more stuff. So it makes sense that women actually did the cooking and took care of the family, that it would have been created. It's like over the years talking about all the history. I mean, all the courses I've been teaching and learning about more and more, that women were definitely so involved in the basic brewing industry to the point that they were selling it from their homes and you know, passing it on and spreading the information until the Industrial Revolution came along. And as soon as that came along, and that was all male forward, it was machines and big equipment that all of a sudden the women let's push you over because you're not capable of handling the equipment, and everything changed. And that's when women all of a sudden took the back seat and took care of families and took care of other things, while the men then dealt with the equipment and started dealing with the bigger things. And at one point, there was no women involved at all until the craft beer industry came along, where everyone was doing small brew batches, and women could get back into the scene and get more involved because it was a little more accommodating for them.
Yeah.
It makes sense in many ways. I mean, you think about it. I mean, I know for a fact as a female, I struggle to lift a 50-liter cake sometimes, and trying to work with some of the equipment in the breweries is not easy. But when you're doing small batches, it's a little bit more, it's easier to work with. And when you have an opportunity as a small microbrewery to get involved in recipes and play around with ideas and concepts, because you're doing so many small batches, you can have fun with it. And people will kind of listen and play around and want to do things and try things out.
Yeah, I got a couple things to talk about on that. One of them, yeah, the original sort of way that women started brewing. I watched Dogfish Head has a wonderful series out, and he went out and did ancient ales. And for the life of me, I cannot remember where this was, but the women used to sit around and chew the corn.
Yeah.
And they found out that women have more of this enzyme in their saliva to be able to actually create this, to be able to make better beer. So that's why women sat around, chewed the corn, spit it in the pot, they boiled it out, and that created alcohol, to keep it short and sweet. The other thing I wanted to touch on was that, when I first started working at OBL, I found it was really difficult at first because, like I said, I did shipping, receiving, and all that sort of thing. So I couldn't, when I first started there, it was difficult to lift almost like a case, and I was bottling. So I would have to do these 30-pound cases and quickly be in tune with putting it on the pallet and in the right spot. And eventually I got to the point where I could lift 2 cases at a time, and I could lift a bag of grain and lift it up the ladder and put it into the grain mill. And I do remember a point where I lifted up 2 cases at one time, and there was one of my coworkers who was a male beside me going, "Oh, wow." So I made it a goal of mine to be able to curl a 20-liter keg and to be able to actually lift a 50-liter keg and carry it across the brew house. And I did get to that point. And that for me was very, very empowering.
Yeah.
A 50-liter keg.
I still
is heavy
can't
for
do
me.
that.
Me either. That's why I kind of gave up the brewing side of it in a big brewery, because I couldn't do the physical part of it because I have physical limitations. But I sure can spread the joy of beer, get people about it.
I mean, it's a very physically demanding job. I mean, it's just like, but as I said, that's as when I actually took the job on at R&B, I mean, the first thing I said is, I can't lift a 50-liter keg. I can't lift a 20-liter keg. How can I do the job and help? And they said, you know what? There are other people in the brewery that can work with you. Like, you're not by yourself, you're a team. And as soon as you realize that, you use the skills that you're good at, and I can taste better than a lot of the guys.
Yeah.
I know better than the other guys. I have better ideas with what to add to casks and what suggestions there are for beer. So why not use those skills and let them do the heavy lifting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually been documented, like there have been studies on it, and women in their genetics are generally better at picking out flavors and picking out components in beer due to wine.
Yep.
It's just it's documented fact unless you talk to Trump. But
it comes from having to feed your families, I think.
Thanks.
Yeah, I've actually heard there's super tasters, and there's far more super tasters that are women than there are that are men, for sure.
Well, the first Master Cicerone in Canada was a female.
Yeah, Morella.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I know of more Cicerone females than anything else. So I think that's amazing. That just gave me the driving force to keep going with what I'm doing. And it does give me a lot to know that, like, my brewmaster will come to me and say, well, what do you think of this?
Yeah,
and
that's kind of
that's awesome.
That to me means he's an amazing gentleman. He realizes that through the studies, I may not be able to do what he does, but he respects my opinion and my palate, and that is priceless. It's priceless. I can't do what he does, but he still comes to me for advice, and that's amazing.
And I think that's probably honestly more valuable. Not to say that anyone can carry things, but if you can't now, you could work up to it. Whereas something like a refined palate or putting the time and effort into wanting to learn more about things like that, you really got to want to do that. And I think that's, to me, that's better than carrying something heavy.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah. Speaking of other things that people may or may not know. I mean, wasn't the first documented use of hops in beer by a female as well, Saint Hildegard?
Yep, Hildegard.
Yeah. See, there you go.
Although funny enough, we kind of in BC we take that and we turn it into a slightly sexualized image.
Is that driftwood?
Yep.
No, who does Naughty Hildegard?
It's naughty Hildegard, yeah. But the NBC image itself,
Yeah, it's not
isn't
terrible.
fun.
But
and they went out and they did put out a whole thing about the history of it. I believe it was in the Growler magazine, and so they sort of took that and actually gave the history and didn't sexualize the image, which I think is important.
Well,
it used to be a little bit more like she had her skirt up a little bit.
Yeah.
They toned that down and kind of made it a little different, which is good, right? That's what you need. So it's just interesting,
Right? Sorry,
You go, girl.
it's still got the name, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's still Naughty Hildegard.
So, but it's the same thing. Like, well, I'm curious what the double standard there. Like, why is there not a beer called Naughty Boy? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry, but like,
Actually, I think there might be.
There probably is.
I think there might be. And I think it's
but it is interesting though the way that they kind of go through the like you wonder how they got there, and then I know they kind of turned it into, but a lot of things I talk online with people about is get like a blonde ale or a red ale, even like can we just stop with the blonde woman thing?
Yeah.
All over the, sexualized blonde women on a blonde ale, like seriously, like how lazy can you be?
And it's interesting because again, Old Ale has one of the our most popular beer is the Naughty Blonde Ale, and originally it was called the Chilliwack Blonde Ale, and it had an image of a cowgirl. It was like a silhouette, and she was like this on the bottle. Well, our theme now, since being under new ownership and new branding, is it's called the Naughty Blonde Ale, but it's not naughty as in like Naughty Hildegard. It's naughty as in like a naughty pine, like it's Naughty Blonde Ale. But the amount of jokes that I get in this tasting room about like, but it gets more women intrigued in it. They're more intrigued to try it because they're like, oh well, I'm a naughty blonde. I'll try that. I'm like, it's not that kind of naughty, guys. Like, come on. It's like a naughty pine. That's a blonde ale. Like, come on. I don't know. I think that women almost, a certain kind of woman will feed into that as well, almost feed their ego. And again, because when I see stuff like, again, I'll go back to Old Milwaukee and Lagunitas. Well, I used to do pinup modeling. So when I see that, I will sort of gravitate to it and be like, yes, that's an amazing image. To me, that's empowering. Part of me wanted to be like, well, I want to be that Central City girl. I want to do that. I dye my hair red. I was doing that for a while. So where does this sort of lie between being offensive and being sort of empowering, where you look at it as being like, hey, women in the industry? Again, I just absolutely would love to get another opinion on this.
I think it stops becoming empowering when someone else is profiting off of it. So if it's you modeling and posing and it's for yourself, then that's great. And that's the empowering part. It's when someone else is taking, whether it's not if it's not your image, an image like it, not saying they're copywriting, but that sort of pinup pose, and then profiting off of it for the cheap, yeah, look, they're teasing, yeah. I think that's where the empowerment stops.
Yeah.
And then it becomes about making money.
Yeah. Totally understand. Yeah. Again, Old Milwaukee is sort of profiting off of this sexually suggestive thing with people who don't understand the pinup culture, but then you have maybe something like Central City who gets that there is a pinup culture in Vancouver that might appreciate something like that. I don't know.
Hmm.
Just throwing it out there.
What if something like that was put towards funding pinup or the burlesque scene or whatever to help empower women? I don't know. I'm just asking.
That would be fantastic. I know that for example, Storm Brewing recently collaborated with a burlesque show that was in Vancouver. The burlesque dancers went into Storm Brewing and they did shoots in there. And for me, I was so envious. I thought that would be my dream. You're putting like two of my favorite things together in one. East End has an amazing culture for that. So I think if there was more actual collaboration with the amazing burlesque scene that is in Vancouver, and you were to take real women who are in Vancouver, who are in the scene, and you put that on your label, that's more empowering than just being like, well, let's just draw the big-titted woman and put it on our can.
Good point.
Yeah. I think that would be great because Vancouver does have an amazing burlesque scene.
It does,
for
yeah.
sure.
All right. I guess Chelsea wanted to know doesn't seem to be, but is there any differences in tastes and trends between women and men other than obviously the advertising?
I think so.
You know what? I spent 2016 working in tasting rooms unsuccessfully.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because there were a lot of women that would come to me that say, I don't like beer. I'm here because my husband's here. I'm here because my friends like beer, but I don't like beer. And then as soon as I hear that, I'm like, all right, challenge accepted.
Yeah.
And so many if they say they like wine, give them a sour, and 9 times out of 10 they're gonna love it.
I was actually just saying, I know for me, I glommed onto the sour. I think before I was hearing that it was kind of becoming this big trend happening, and that was just partly because, I've always liked beer, but I really liked the particular taste of sour beers. And I remember talking to people before it had become as big as it is now, and they kind of looked at me like I was crazy. But I think that a lot of as you guys would know a lot better than I, but having worked in some tasting rooms too, I think a lot of people that I would serve wine to normally, if I were giving them a sour to taste, they would often enjoy the sour. Or if they're cider drinkers.
But even more than that, I think what it is it's just, and it's not even necessarily a female thing. It's changing that perception of what someone thinks of beer. Everyone thinks of this straw flavored drink that their dad, full straw flavored crap that their dad drank, and you show them a sour, and tons of times a coffee stout was it's just finding
absolutely.
that beer that
doesn't make them think of beer.
And they're like, holy shit, beer can be something different. And then you like beer because beer is so huge, and this is going into a completely different subject. And I don't know. I think it's starting to break the mold that beer is a men's drink and beer is one thing, and it's just, you have to change people's perception.
Yeah, I really like that. And you notice that the BC Beer Awards, which are always awesome, good job, and some of the other festivals I've attended, you do see a lot more of a mixed crowd now.
Yeah.
It's all. It's like Comic-Cons too. That used to be just a bunch of dudes, maybe a couple women, but now you see a bigger mix. Every time I go down to Portland, it's like 50-50 easily.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see that where that culture has thrived, you really do get to see a lot more people that, they go together, they go as groups. It's not just a bunch of guys. It's a good mixed, diverse crowd. It's a lot of fun that way. And I'd be curious. I can't answer this because I'm a guy, but for girls, for the females, how do you feel going to a craft beer pub versus going to a bar or a club? How is your experience different?
I don't feel
Drastically different.
it's on display. I don't know. Maybe that's a bad thing to say, but like I don't think it's a totally different thing to me.
Well, I'm 40, so I don't want to go to a club because they ignore me.
In my tasting room, I had a bit of an issue. I had somebody. I feel like the craft beer culture hasn't quite hit Chilliwack the same as even the Fraser Valley. So people look at it as maybe it's a cool place to drink. And I had somebody who, in my mind, thought was maybe crossing a line with these ladies that were at the table across from them. And I went up to those ladies and I said, you know what? I said, this is a place of respect. This is how I run it. And if those gentlemen were making you feel, well, that they weren't gentlemen, if they were making you feel uncomfortable, I said, that's unacceptable. And for that reason alone, I will remove them from my tasting room. Because it may have been acceptable and you put up with it in a bar. I said, this is not a bar. This is a place where you come, you drink, and you be social.
And bring your
There is a way of
times.
maybe, like, you know, hitting on a woman without being offensive. And I felt that these people were being offensive as far as my standards in this place.
Yeah, and it shouldn't even be at
They were
bars
like,
either.
oh, no, it's fine. It's fine. I said, no, it's not fine. Because you should not feel like that is okay because you experience it in other places.
Yeah.
If you want to hit on a girl, ask her what she's drinking, what she likes about it, and what kind of flavors she's experiencing, and why she likes that beer. And there's so much to talk about besides, let's go to this bar and drink other beer. And let's get messed up. That's inappropriate to me.
You can flirt without
It's
being
all
a bro.
Because
Yeah.
rooms
Yeah, exactly.
sometimes.
What was that? Sorry?
I said it's totally different because a lot of tasting rooms allow children now, so it can be a experience and not just like a bar where where you're just there to drink. It's like if you go to Foamer's Folly, for instance, they encourage you to bring food from outside and sit with your family and have a beer, but it's not the same culture as it is in a bar at all.
Yeah.
It's more realistic. It's more like something you could do on a daily basis, even into your 40s or 50s or whatever,
80s or whatever.
It's like, to me, the modern, like we talked about this, like the modern, like family pub environment, or like we think of pubs differently than I think they, in Europe or in England. But like, that's what it was at one point, or that's what it is there now. And it hasn't been here, but I think it's kind of modernized that way of thinking of.
Yeah, at least we have that option.
From the flip side, when I worked in tasting room briefly with Mike, we could be there at the same time.
I'll just cover
and I would, people would come in and they'd look at the board and they'd look at me and then they'd turn to Mike and be like, so what do we got?
Oh, no.
So I was, and he had the info.
Oh, that hurts. That hurts.
And so,
yeah,
that happened a lot.
But on
fine,
the
I'll
side
just
of that,
on the other side of the bar too, Britt and I go to tasting rooms all the time because it's something we love to do as a couple. And immediately they'll start up. I don't like to go. Well, first, when I go to tasting room, I don't like to announce that I'm a blogger. I just want to get the real experience that they give to any person. But the conversation is always directed towards me, and Britt's kind of sitting on the wings, and
I'm like, I know some stuff. Like,
I know, I can tell by the look on her face the level of pissed off she gets, and it gets to a certain point where she just interjects, and it's not right, and it's it's something that everybody has to be aware of.
And that's certainly not the case with many tasting rooms, but it has been at some.
Yeah, I would rather talk to you, Britt.
That's part of the thing that I love about it, is that nobody expects me to know anything about beer. So they'll sit down and start telling me about what they're drinking. And then when I spit it all back to them, plus some, I've literally had people say, "Who was that girl?" when I left, because they couldn't believe that a woman would know that much about beer.
I feel like it kind of goes back to a little bit of what I was saying earlier. Like, you have companies like Pretty Kitty that goes out and hires these girls to speak about beer. So then they see a woman in the tasting room, and they don't, they don't pay much attention to it. And again, that's something that I want to be the difference, is that, like, you can talk to me about this. And the more that I am working behind the counter, the more I'm finding that the men actually know less than the women, because, as stereotypical as this may be, the women drink wine. So the wine people know about sommeliers. So once you talk about the Cicerone program and you talk about how it's the same thing but for beer, then they start to listen a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, most men will come in and say, "Well, what do you have that tastes like coconut?" At least the women come in and say, "Well, I don't really drink beer. What do you have?" I say, "Well, we have this wonderful plum kettle sour porter. You would like that. It's got this thing that's it's almost like, I don't know anything about wine, but it's got like a tannin, like red wine. But if you drink white wine, well, we have this wonderful mango wheat over here. Then it's got this dry bite to it." And you just kind of, I don't know, here's the thing. And I can almost relate to them better than I can have the men that come in the tasting room.
Because you guys have nothing that's even remotely close to kokanee.
Yeah, thank God.
Oh, I
It's all way better.
Thank you.
I used to find the same thing in the liquor store. I was the only female working, and I with amongst 3 or 4 guys, and you get a guy and a girl, a couple coming in asking for beer suggestions, and the guy would say, "Oh, well, I know what I want to drink." It's just like, and they would go right to the guy and say, "Okay, can you help me with this?" And the guys would always say, "You might want to talk to the woman over there because she's the beer manager." And they always would say, "Oh."
Yeah, I love that
okay.
too.
And they felt uncomfortable about even talking to me, but the women would come up and say, "Well, now that my boyfriend's out of the room, talk to me. How can you help me?"
Yeah.
And it was just, that's part why I enjoyed it so much, is because I could actually help the women actually elevate what their taste and their interests and enjoy the beers.
Can I also just quickly interject with, I was at Foamer's Folly a couple of weeks ago, and there were only 2 males behind the bar. And those 2 males on a Saturday night were the most amazing tasting room workers I have dealt with in a very long time. Their communication skills and how they handled complaints and everything, I've got to say that's amazing. And I think the issue here is that there are more breweries hiring women to do tastings and working in the tasting room, and without giving the men a chance a little bit. They're more like the grunt workers. They're more doing the shipping and receiving and all that, and they're not giving the women a chance to do that. But if Foamer's Folly can make that switch and be like, I've got a woman working in the back, but I have 2 men working the front end that actually know what they're talking about. To me, that's impressive, and that's breaking down borders, and I think that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
I think it's also like this podcast is obviously about beer, but I just think like all of this is just, speaks to issues much bigger than beer, right? I mean, what we're talking about happen in many industries, right?
Oh yeah.
So
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's funny you think about the tasting rooms and that. Like, you go to Steel and Oak, and you got Jamie and there. It's Heather, right? Or am I?
Yes.
Looks at my name. Yeah, Jamie and Heather. Sorry, Heather.
Clearly, you're old friends.
You know what? In my experience there, talking to them, they know more about the beer there that they serve than anyone else working that tasting room, other than the owners. And the brewers.
And they should.
So
yeah.
So they're just a great example of how you can have a a diverse crew, and yeah, I personally think it makes for a better experience for everybody. And everybody should be educated, serving stuff, and there's zero reason why why gender even needs to kind of come into it as a reason to move someone somewhere else, right? You think you'd have just a good diverse crew working in those places, and
Well-
maybe the biggest difference is they probably do slightly better on tips. I would gather.
Well, another neat thing is how a lot of these breweries are taking the women from their tasting rooms who already know so much about their product and teaching them how to brew.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really miss seeing Roxy or Roxanne at Moody Ales because she used to be always at the tasting room, and now she's always hiding in the brewery.
Making great beers.
Oh hell yeah, she is.
Yeah, a lot of them have been doing that.
She's killing it.
So guys, my battery's dead, and I've used an hour of data,
Ugh.
Yes.
so I'm gonna jump now.
No worries.
But it was so nice to meet all of you, and I'll see a lot of you at Cyrus.
Yep.
Sounds
Nice to
good.
see you.
Nice to meet you.
You too.
See ya.
Bye.
See you again, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye. Yeah, Mike, we should probably close off with Cyrus.
It's a festival about women in beer. Most of the beer, I guess all the beers are at least collaborations with the women in the brewery, if it's the tasting room, if it's in the brewery itself. Who here's going there, I guess, first?
I've got my ticket.
If I'm free, I'm going.
What are the dates?
It
I know
is
know
April
that.
22nd.
So like 2 weekends from now.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't make it, but if I was able to, I'd certainly get out there for that. Sounds great.
Yeah, because I love the
We
fact.
are we're closing the tasting room a little bit early so that we can actually go to the Brew and Chew at Lakeside Beach Club in Cultus Lake. It's going to be a great event. However, we do have an assistant brewer who recently was promoted from the tasting room to work in the brewery, and this will be her first cask event at the cask festival there. She's got a wonderful, wonderful cask going on. We did a sample of it on our Wednesday cask event in the tasting room. It was a major hit, so look for Oldio Brewing there because she's going to knock this one out of the park. For sure, for sure. All the power to Brittany.
Nice. Do you guys have a cask there, Lundy?
We don't this year. We're a little bit too overloaded with our ale house right now.
That makes sense.
Yeah, too much going on.
Perfect. All right. Well, I guess if we're done, I guess that's everything. Thanks for joining us.
Yay!
Thank you, Mike, for having me on.
You're welcome.
Nice
Cheers.
to meet you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank
joining.
you. It's really great meeting all of you.
Yeah,
It's been an honor.
yeah, we
I
should
appreciate
have we should have all of you back on our podcast just as a
Yeah.
regular thing.
Yeah,
I
just
think
for any old.
So-
just in the spirit of it and making it a more diverse crowd. I think it makes sense. So
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Pacific Beer Chat. To follow the podcast, search for us on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, and or YouTube. If you've enjoyed us, we'd also appreciate you leaving a review or a comment. Thanks.